Hello student, today we will be dealing with your geographies chapter number 6, Geomorphic Process. Okay, so in our previous topics we've already studied about how the earth was born, right, and how it got evolved, its crust and other inner layers. So along with the movements of your crystal plates, and also the informations about an earthquake and the forms of volcanisms, and also about the rocks and minerals, how it was composed. Okay, so that are the things that we've already done in the previous chapters. Okay, so in this particular chapter we will be learning in detail about the surface of the earth, okay, on which we live. All right, so let's start with it. So the first and foremost thing that we are going to study about is why earth is uneven. All right, so here this particular statement or the question, why earth is uneven, that is particularly first thing that you're supposed to know. All right, so why is it uneven? So it is basically that the crust, earth crust, right, you all know what earth crust is, right, or it is also known as a lithosphere, right? So the earth crust is always dynamic means it is always changing. All right, so there's as in previous chapter we've already studied, right, a lot of movement takes place, that there's a movement of plates and other things. All right, so that is why the earth crust is always dynamic. All right, so it either moves vertically or horizontally. Okay, so the earth is said to be uneven because of the internal and the external forces that earth is changing its surface conditions. All right, so because of the internal and the external forces, earth keeps on changing. All right, that is why it is said to be dynamic. All right, and then the main thing here you have to remember is the difference in the internal force makes the surface uneven. All right, the internal forces, the movement in the internal force or anything that goes in internally inside the earth, it makes the surface of the earth uneven, wearing down of different various relief features, and that particular thing is known as your gradation. All right, and the earth is uneven due to two forces. You have endogenic and exogenic force. All right, so what is endogenic force here? The endogenic forces, it always elevate parts of the earth's surface and helps surface, and hence the exogenic process fails to even out the relief variations of the surface of the earth. So because of these two particular forces, the earth is said to be an uneven conditions. All right, then variation remains as long as there is difference between endogenic and exogenic forces. So there is going to be a vast difference. There is going to be there is going to be seen a lot of differences in the earth's surface because of these two particular forces. All right, and the surface of the earth is very sensitive. All right, it is said that the earth's surface is very sensitive, and hence human being is using the surface intensively and extensively. All right, as we all know, I mean, we people are exploiting everything these days, right? So we all have to be very we ourselves also has to be sensitive, as well as we need to think about the earth. All right, as well the surface of the earth is very sensitive as it keeps on changing. All right, and also plus human beings are using it very intensively as well as very extensively. All right, okay. All right, so let's look into what geomorphic process basically is. Okay, so here the two processes that we talked about, that is endogenic and exogenic forces. All right, so these two particular forces, it causes physical stress and chemical actions on the Earth's material and brings the changes in the configurations of the Earth's surface, and that is known as your geomorphic process. So what is geomorphic process? When this particular forces, two forces, that is endogenic and exogenic forces, right? So when this particular two forces, it causes the earth materials to change, right? To bring the earth materials keeps on changing, right, because of this two particular thing. So that process is known as the geomorphic process. All right, and you also see a disastrophism and volcanisms are the endogenic process. So these two are the endogenic process examples. All right, that is your disastrophism and volcanism. So what is disastrophism and volcanism? We will look into it like afterwards, right, after this particular like subtopic. So let's just like take only the words right now. Okay, so this just remember, these are the two like examples of your endogenic processes. All right, and then coming towards the exogenic process, you have your weathering, mass wasting, erosion, and depositions. So these are exogenic forces. So this particular things also we are going to learn in detail in this particular chapter. Okay, and then you have any exogenic element of nature capable of acquiring and transporting Earth's material can called a geomorphic agent. All right, so anything that transports or like the materials of earth from one place to another. All right, so that is known as a geomorphic agent. So as the surface of the earth keeps on changing, all right, so why does it keeps on changing? Because there is a lot the internal and the external forces keeps on like changing and like moving on. All right, so there's a lot of movement in it. All right, so and then what happens is that the surface, whatever the things are there in the surface of the earth, it is either like transported or like moved from one particular place to another, leading to the change in that particular crust. Right, so that transportation of earth material is known as your geomorphic agent. Okay, so they become mobile when there is a gradient. Okay, so those things can be mobile only when there is gradient. All right. Okay, so let's look into what endogenic process is. Okay, so endogenic process is the energy generating from within the earth is the main force behind the endogenic geomorphic process. Okay, so the whatever the energy that is generated from within the earth, right, from the internal of the earth, so that the main forces behind the endogenic is the endogenic process. Okay, so how is it, like how is those how are those energy generated, or due to what those energies are being generated? So you have your radioactive. All right, so radioactive is one of the like ways that generate energy from within the earth. All right, so that's your number one. So then you have your rotational force. So rotational force is the second ways that generate the energy. So you all know what radioactive and rotation force is, right? I don't have to tell you in detail what rotation is. Okay, so as you all know, earth keeps on like moving. All right, it is rotating every day, and I mean every time. All right, it is still rotating. Revolution is taking place, rotation is taking place. So that's the main thing. All right, so because of the rotational force, the energy is also generated. And then coming towards your third, that is your tidal friction. So because of the tidal frictions also, the energy is generated, all right, from within the earth. And then this particular endogenic forces is being like formulate, or like it's been applied, or has been like seen in the forces. Okay, then you have your primordial heat from the origin of the earth. Okay, and also you have disastrophism and volcanism. So this particular thing is also due to the geothermal gradients and the heating flow from within the earth. All right, so this is basically this endogenic forces basically is like from within the earth, right? The energy is being generated from within the earth. So you all know volcanism and everything that happens, it's inside the earth, right? The mantle, you have your molten magma, everything. So that's everything is inside the earth. So the energy is being like created or generated, and eventually it pops out in the surface of the earth, right? So that's how the energy has been created. That's what it means. Okay. All right, so let's move on with your disastrophism. So what is disastrophism? Sorry. So all processes that move, elevate, or build up portions of the earth crust. All right. So whatever things or materials, or the processes that builds up the earth crust is said to be a disastrophisms. All right. For example, like earthquake or your volcanoes. All right. So it gives out a lot of molten, like from internal forces. It like the whole hot magma, it comes out on the surface of the earth, right? And what happens, like, we've already studied about it, right? And then it gets like cooled, and then it forms into different processes takes place, right? So all those processes, all right, that builds up the earth crust is known to be a disastrophism. All right. So disastrophism includes, number one, you have orogenic process. So it's basically a mountain building through folding. All right. So we've already studied about folding, faulting, the movement of your crust, your plate movement. Right. So that is your that includes your disastrophism. All right. So like not only volcano, even the earthquake, all right, the movement of your plate tectonics is also comes into this particular process, all the different processes. All right. So number one is the orogenic process, which helps in building your mountains is through folding. All right. Then you have aperogenic process, which leads to uplifting large part of the earth crust. Okay, so this is also somewhat similar to your mountain building. Like it can be either your hills or your like any part of the land is being uplifted. Okay, so that's the second part, or the second forces. Then you have your earthquakes, your sudden movement. All right, so there's an earthquake, there's a sudden movement in the earth. All right, I mean, the whole earth, like it shakes, and then eventually it leads to like some like the disaster has been taken place. All right, it leads to a lot of calamities. It's a natural calamity. So there's a lot of accident that takes place, all right, because of this earthquake. Not only like it destroys the man-made structures, but also there's a lot of destructions in the like whole nature itself. All right, so when the nature is like disturbed, like it leads to a change in that particular area as well. All right, so that is also one of your disastrophism. All right, and then you have your plate tectonics. It involves horizontal movement. Plate tectonic, obviously. All right, so there's a movement inside the earth. So because of that movement, all right, so you have so this plate tectonic is like it moves all the time. Okay, so it is moving every time. There's a plate tectonic movement every time. That is why there is we feel the folding, faulting, the earthquake, your this thing, a lot of natural calamities takes place. All right, because of that only different relief features have been formed. Okay, so even plate tectonics plays an important role in this disaster physium. Okay, so all these processes that move or elevate or build up the portions of the earth crust is said to be a disastrophism. Okay. All right, let's move on to your volcanism. This particular word volcanisms, like you with the word itself, you'll come to know it's like it's talking about the volcanoes. Okay, so movement of molten rock towards the earth's surface, and also formations of many intrusive and extrusive, sorry, volcanic forms. Okay, so there's a lot of like pressure or the energy that takes place. I mean, inside, like there's a lot of movement that takes place inside the earth. All right, so because as like there's a lot of pressure, and like it cannot take like the pressure, like it is moving every now and then, all right, inside the earth. The hot molten magma has a lot of energy. It is very hot, all right. It keeps on moving, and then what happens, like at a moment, like it cannot control itself, and then it pops out from the inside of the earth, to the outer layer of the earth, all right, as a when it comes out in the earth's surface, it is known as a magma, or a lava, all right. So it is known as a lava, right. So that lava, or the molten rock, all right, when it comes out on this earth's surface, it cools down, all right. So when it cools down, what have different processes takes place, right. So because of that process, I mean, there's a lot of formations of different things, all right. So it leads to the different formations of rocks, as it is said, intrusive and extrusive volcanic formations, all right, is there. So that is what it means, okay. And then volcanism is the process in which volcanoes take place, okay. So volcanoes are the landforms formed due to volcanic processes. That's all for volcanisms. Okay, so now let's move into what exogenic forces means. Okay, so this particular word, exogenic process, they derive the energy from atmosphere determined by the prime sources, all right. So we've already done endogenic. Endogenic is basically through your internal forces, all right, internal, whatever things, whatever internal whatever takes place inside the earth is like endogenic process, all right. But like exogenic process is like taken where the energy, it's like taken from the outside of the earth, that is through your atmosphere, okay. So exogenic process, they derive the energy from the atmosphere, okay. So the sun, and also gradients created by the tectonic factors, okay. So atmosphere, so you have different gases outside the atmosphere, right, okay. And then also you have your sun, your moon, different things. You can feel, you all know what is in the atmosphere, right. So all those features, all those processes, all those things, like made up, uh, it generates energy for the exogenic process to take place, okay. So then you have your gravitational force create gradient towards downslope direction. So what is gravitational force? See, because of this gravitational force only, people, all right, not only people, everything is like it's stable in one particular place, all right. So you have your earth, right, it's round and like it's a spherical in shape basically, all right. But what because of this gravitational force, we aren't flying, all right. If there was no gravitational force, we would be flying everywhere, okay. So for example, you all know, right, I mean, you all might have studied in your physics or even the other science subjects that because of the gravitational force only, Einstein like came to know about the like there's a like, you all know, right, I mean, he talked about the apple, I mean, like coming down, why does it fall down, all right. Or you can do the experiment yourself, all right. If you throw anything up, it eventually comes down, yes or no? Yes. So that is because of your gravitational force. Only those stuffs which do not have like for example, only those things which has helium gas in it, it floats, all right. For example, this particular balloon, all right. So normally if you blow the balloons with your mouth, all right, the gases from your mouth, it is not going to, I mean, float in the air, all right. I mean, it just moves from one place to another, eventually it falls on the ground, all right. But if that balloon is like in that particular balloon, if it's put, the helium gas is put in it, and, and you leave it out in the like atmosphere or like outside your place, it eventually like it flies off because that balloon contains helium gases, okay. So it like the gravitational force does not work on it, okay. So basically gravitational force, it creates all the gradients to move downward slope to the direction downward, like to pulls towards one, like it pulls down everything. All right, so force applied per unit area is called stress. Okay, all right. So stress can be produced in a solid body, pushing or pulling. This includes deformation. Okay, so stress can be produced how? In a solid body through pushing or pulling. Okay, so forces acting along the faces of earth material are shear stresses. So it is this stress that breaks rocks and other earth's materials. All right, yes. So another thing, all right, as we said, earth's crust keeps on changing. It's because through the like the different features that is available outside the earth. All right, I mean, relief features. All right, I mean, and also a natural process, for example your rain, your wind. Okay, so all these things, like it breaks down the rocks or the different materials into smaller pieces, and then form and leads to the changes in that particular area. All right, or also the rocks and minerals, those stuff. So that's what it means. So forces acting along the faces of earth material are shear stress. So this is what it means. Okay, and then you have your gravitational stress as well. So gravitational stress therefore is a molecular stress which is caused by temperature change, crystallization and melting. So because of the temperature, when there is a temperature change, when there is crystallization, or whenever there is a melting takes place, so this particular gravitational stress takes place. Okay, then you have the basic reason for weathering, mass movement, erosion, and depositions is the development of stress in the Earth's material. See, that's what I'm saying. Because of the weathering, because of the soil erosion, because of the wind, weathering is wind, right? The wind, the rain, right? Or the sun. Because of those factors, all right. So a lot of there's a change in the earth's crust. Okay, so there's a development of stress in the earth's material. Okay, so from one physical features, because of those natural forces, it changes its like texture, its shape, its color, or different things. Okay, so all the exogenic process are covered under general term denudation. That's what it means. Okay, so you all can see this table. You have your denudation process and the driving forces. So let's look into it. So you have your denudation process. You have, first thing, you have your processes. So in this particular process, what are the different processes in denudation process? That is your weathering, mass movement, and your erosions and transportation. All right, so what is weathering? So it is a gravitational, molecular stress and or chemical action. Weathering basically is like sort of like wind and natural force. Okay, so this gravitational, molecular stress, everything is their natural forces which leads to the breakdown of different rocks and materials, and then changes in the earth's crust or earth's features. Okay, so that's your one. So then you have your mass movement. Mass movement is basically gravitational force or moving one particular stuffs to another energy. All right, and erosions and transportation is a kinetic energy. Okay, so these three different are the driving forces, energy. All right, so this is basically the table that shows the denudational process and their driving forces. Okay, so then when climatic factors are common, the intensity of action depends on the type and the structure of rocks. Okay, so actually, I mean, it's just the explanation of this particular table itself. Okay, so because of the different climate changes, or the temperature or the pressure, because of those, okay, because of that, there's a lot of changes in the structures of rocks and minerals. Okay, so the structure, it includes the faults, orientations, inclination of beds, presence or absence of joints, bedding, planes, harnesses, softness of constituent minerals, chemical susceptibility of minerals, constituents, the permeability or impermeability. All right, so these are the different structures that includes when there's like changes taking places, okay, when there's an action being take place. So different types of rocks offer varying resistance to various geomorphic processes. All right, so because of those different natural forces, there's a change in the earth's crust. So the change in earth's crust basically is due to geomorphic processes. All right, so then you have the effects of exogenic forces may be small and slow, but in long run they have a great effect. So you have both the exogenic forces and endogenic forces which works upon this particular geomorphic processes. Finally, the surface of the earth is operated by different geomorphic processes and at varying rates. Okay, that's all for this first video. We'll continue in the second part. Thank you.